Okay, I'm Martha Rowland, and I'm the chairman of the Star Homemaker. And I have others on my committee that are here tonight and some that have also been Star winners. I have chaired this committee for 10 years, this being my 10th year. I earned the title of Star Homemaker in 2012. It was quite a process with getting everything done. I sewed too many items, had to go back and look and see what else I had to do. My sewing machine broke down. I threw it in the car, drove up I-79, took it to the people that fix sewing machines, and there was nothing wrong with it, so I guess it was the operator. So I got my entries in, and to my surprise, I won. And I also took grand champion in the canning division, which I'm like, wow, whatever. The whole thing was a whatever moment. I'm just like, wow. And I won my championship on red raspberry vinegar, and the red raspberries were grown by my husband, so that was kind of nice. When I entered Star, and I also was the chairman, I felt like I needed to leave the building, leave the fairgrounds as they tallied up things, because I thought it would look better that way and not have, people think I was there. I was not there. When I took over the Star, I thought, what do I do? So I just muddled through, kept muddling, and I'm still muddling. And it gets really hard in January when you're running out in the middle of a snowstorm getting the sponsors, but we managed to get a lot of nice sponsors because we want whoever wins this honor to have nice gifts. We do a lot of prep work before the entries. We meet the Wednesday before the fair. The whole building, the whole family living building meets the Wednesday before the fair so that we can tidy up and make it look really great for everyone that's entering things. We haven't always had a nice display. I have posters down here. We've had a nice display, but now we have our own, and it's our own entity, and it's like a stage, and it's my husband, my grandson, and some volunteers back in 2013 took it upon themselves, designed it, and built it, and it's just really, really nice. And I guess that's all I have to say, and I'll turn it over to Beth Bustamante.
Hi, I'm Beth Bustamante, and I'm on the committee, and I had the privilege of winning the Star Homemaker. I made a presentation here just to kind of go over the different logistics that are involved in the Star Homemaker, because there is a lot involved, and it does take time. It isn't something that you want to whip up the month before. Although people have done it, your success in winning is something that's devised over a year. From the time that the fair ends, you're working for the next year to win the Star Homemaker. So a little bit of history about the Star Homemaker. This is Mr. and Mrs. Ivan Rose, and they are the ones that initially started the whole program for the Star Homemaker. And they had went to a fair in Florida, and they found a department there that was called the Star Homemaker, and the other star was for florals. And so they came back up here, and they presented the idea to the Star to the fair board, and they thought, well, let's give it a shot. So they all voted, and everything was approved to have that competition added. So in 1986, that was the very first year that they had the Star. And then since then, we've had entries for every year. Like my mom had said, the Star Homemaker Committee is my mom, myself, and Carolyn Treffler and Connie Greeley. And basically what we do is we're there on Wednesday. We're there on Friday and Saturday, just kind of taking in people that want to enter the homemaker. It can be quite challenging, and you just really have to be organized and try and get people to the right departments that they need to be. And there's a cutoff time, and that's at 11 o'clock on Saturday. So it's important to have everything there, everything ready and organized to the best of your ability, and then be ready to enter. So what does 4-star mean? Okay, it's for 4 different categories. So we have baking, canned or dried food, clothing, and needlecraft. And if you get a fair book, each of those departments specifies everything that you can make in that category. So in order to do that, you need to have a book so that you know and have some ideas that you want to make. There are some rules that you have to follow. So you have to be 19 and older, and you have to be a resident of Crawford County. And on that day, you have to show us your driver's license so that we know that you are a true Crawford County resident, because it is just for Crawford County. You have to make and enter in an exhibit in each of these 4 categories. So you have to at least have 1 in baking, 1 in canned, 1 in clothing, 1 in needlecraft. However, to win, you would want to put 3 in each, and that is the top amount that you can enter. So anything more than that, it would not be part of the 4-star. So you can enter 100 items, which we have had homemakers do in the past, but you need to have at least 3 in each of those categories. The reason behind that is it increases your chance of winning. So if you said, oh, I just want to make a pie, well, that's fine, but you need to have more in there, because it's all based on a tally system of each ribbon. So all the items that you make have to be completed by the close of last year. So, no, I don't mean it that way. If you enter an item, it had to be started by the close of last year. You can't have an item that you entered last year into the 4-star homemaker. I hope that makes sense. So participants will choose their entries in each category and enter no more than 3 items, like I mentioned. So each ribbon is worth so many points. So blue is 20, red is 15, and white is 10. So you enter a pie, you enter bread, and you enter a cake. And you each get a blue ribbon on that. So that would be 60 points within there. So then we tally up all of those points, and then that's how we determine who the 4-star winner is. In case of a tie, and this has happened, because we have such talented people who enter the 4-star homemaker, it can get quite competitive. So the first tiebreaker would be the person who has the most blue ribbons after we have tallied everything. Then the second tiebreaker would be the most red. Then the third tiebreaker would be the most white. And the fourth would be a coin toss. And we haven't gotten to that part yet, but I wouldn't doubt that we would. Our 4-star homemaker prizes, like my mom had said, she goes out in January and collects all the donations from our local businesses that we have here in Meadville and Linesville and Titusville or wherever, Sagertown. They're very generous. And so for our newly crowned 4-star, as well as second and third runner-up, there's always great prizes. As well as the Crawford County Fair, the baking department has a pretty nice check that you get from the baking department. We get, there are specific prizes just for 4-star. We get a really cool license plate that would have the year that you would want, that you win, and it says 4-star homemaker. You also get a really pretty charm from, there's the plate. Here, I can put it up, sure. Thank you. This is the plate, and you can proudly put this on the front of your car to show that, you know, you worked so hard to get that award. You also get a really pretty star charm for a bracelet, and you get the famous red shirts that we wear. There's the necklace. That's on the bracelet. Yeah. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Anita Woods.
I'm Anita Woods. I was the 4-star in 2016. I put a little PowerPoint together just to give you some background on my sewing and the things I enjoy through life. This is myself here, and the slide, I think it said 1965 on the slide that my mother had. So I would have been 8 years old there learning how to sew. That's the Singer featherweight sewing machine that I'm using there. So, next slide, Larry. Oh, sorry. There's the featherweight. I still have that. They're very collectible now, these Singer featherweight sewing machines. I still use it. If I'm going to sew something that's heavy, suede, leather, I'll go and I'll get the old featherweight out and use that for my sewing. So I grew up, my mother sewed. I sewed all through my young years. We did dance costumes, clothes, prom dresses, any kind of formals that we needed. My mother and I would make those together, so she helped me learn that through the years. This is just some things I did besides sewing. That's crewel. That's embroidery, hand embroidery with wool. I made that years ago. That must have been somewhere before 81 because of the address that my dad put on the back of the picture when it was framed. That was a cross stitch I did. I enjoy cross stitch, but anymore my eyes just aren't what they should be for that. That there was a Care Bear. I used to make those. So when I started high school, we had a home ec teacher there that was a wonderful lady, and I spent a lot of time in the home ec room. After high school, I went to Indiana University, and I actually have a degree in home economics in consumer services, is what my degree was in. Once I graduated from Indiana, I decided, I don't want to do retail. I don't want to work 7 days a week, evenings and all that. So I kind of put that aside. And in 1981, I started working for Active Aging, which was Crawford County Senior or Aging back then. We were part of the county. And so that bear and that quilt was made when I was there at Active Aging at a senior center in Conneautville. So that was 1981, the time frame. So I stayed at Active Aging for 35 years, and through those years I always said when I had time I was going to do the 4-star. So when I retired in 2016, that's when I did the 4-star. Once my children were born, pretty much sewing stopped. I'm a mother of twins, so about all I had time to do then was costumes. You know, everybody wanted a couple of homemade costumes a year. That was the kids' favorite holiday. So that just shows you some pictures there. My mother helped make some of those that the kids had there also. She continued to sew. So that was my abilities while the kids were growing up. So my sewing pretty much quit at that time. Then after the kids were grown up, I found a quilt that was actually my son had, and that was about 7 years ago. I went to the Needleworks out in Sagertown, and I took a class for quilting because I didn't quilt all through grades, high school and all that. I basically did sewing, clothing, which is a big difference between sewing and quilting. Quilting, you've got to be very precise. So I took that class, and that's what started some of the projects, and that's how I ended up doing the 4-star. So that year I retired in June of 2016. So I said, okay, about a week, and I always sew all year. I have a bag full of stuff ready to go to the fair this year. So that year, about a week before the fair, my friend showed up in my driveway with the entry packet for the 4-star. She said, fill it out. Well, what was I going to do? I couldn't let her down. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to fill this out. So I started going through the bags of stuff I had that was going to go to the fair that year, and I got things situated. The baking had to wait until the end. In the morning of entries, my husband, I had some things there, and he's like, I don't think you better put that in for sure. I always called him my 4-star advisor. So that morning I was still juggling things to enter for the 4-star. So there you can see some of the items that were entered, or I guess those are the display of the 4-star, the things I made. I still have the little tuffet, that little footstool. That is recycled ties. They were mostly my father's ties. That's my son's footstool there. And the one apron I still have. The clothing went to friend's daughter. This was a Pikachu. Those went to my friend's boys. There's a hat and a book bag is what the other little thing was a backpack. And so they enjoyed those for a few years. And then this is the final step of the 4-star. After you win, you have to do a block, and we have a block through all the years that hangs on the wall at the fair. So if you're at the fair, you might want to look at that and see all of them. So that's the final step of the 4-star, doing your block. So I tried to do all 4 of the categories. And that's machine embroidery. That's what I like to do now, is machine embroidery. And the reason I brought my license plate, this was my motivator. All through the years, I said, I want that license plate. If I can't win that license plate, I always joked with my friends, I said, all right, I'll make my own. I'll have it made and say 4-star wannabe. So that's my plate. So that was my motivation, was this plate. I didn't realize all the other wonderful gifts that were going to be given to a sport, the 4-star. And all the people that actually follow that is amazing. So that's all I have.
I'm Carolyn Schreffler. I was the 2011 4-star winner. I also, as a young child, I was in 4-H. My mom had been a leader, and I was too young to join, so I went along anyway. She just fudged my age on my application, and then I entered 4-H. So I was in 4-H for 6 or 8 years, and then I got out of 4-H and then went through school. I got married and moved away, but through that time I continued to sew, and I mainly made clothes for my kids. But I had always thought after 4-H that I would like to back and enter open class. Well, I moved back to the area, and I was a homemaker, and I did all the cooking and the canning, the sewing, the quilting, all that, all through the years that my kids were growing up. And then I started a job in 2001, and I had a coworker, and she said I should enter 4-star. And I said, no, I don't have time, and I just don't have the time to do that. In addition to that job, I also was on staff for Highland School District in Pittsburgh, making costumes for the musicals, and I'm still on that. So that always started in January through April, May, so I didn't have time to sew anything for anybody else when I was making all these costumes. Anyway, the coworker still continued to hound me. She continued to say, you should do this, you should do this. And finally, in 2003, I decided I would do it just to get her off my back. And so I did enter 4-star. I actually was, I think it was a 3-way tie for 4th place my first year. I will say that it is discouraging. It took me 8 years to get it. And even though did a lot of baking and cooking and canning, sewing, there's still, depending on how the judges judge, because you enter an open class, and so you're judged against other folks. Anybody that enters in the fair, you're judged against them. The judges don't know that you have a 4-star item because the names and the actual star that they put on the ticket is folded inside. So they don't know that they're judging a 4-star item along with the open class. So it was discouraging for me at different times. I often thought about giving up, but my family and my coworkers and everybody, they kept saying, no, you can do this, you can do this. And it's funny because the lady that kept getting on me to start it in the first place, when it was taking forever for me to get it, she got to the point where she said, are you going to win this year? And I said, well, I don't know, I'm going to try. So through that 8 years, though, I did talk to other girls, women that had won it, asked for suggestions. I did talk to some of the judges, asked what they were looking for in different categories. I did, at the end of the fair, I would take the newspaper, I'd take the fair book, and I'd sit down with a notebook and I'd write down everything that wasn't entered. Whatever category there was that there was no entry, then I would write that down and say, okay, maybe I should enter here because I won't have as much competition. Once I did start, like if you make something in September and you don't show it again until August, there were some things that I made. Canned meat was one of them. Canned hamburger was one of them. And to keep it from looking aged, I would put that in a top shelf of one of my kitchen cabinets, and I would pull a black sock down over it, and that was to keep the light out, and it was to keep it it was canned. It was an item that would qualify for 4-star because it was done in that year, but I wanted it to look fresh, and so that was the way of doing that. I had some of the 4-star ladies that had won it before that wanted me to do items that they had done. And I said, no, I want to do it my way. I'm asking for your suggestions, for help, but I have to choose the items and I have to make them. And for my own something that I wanted to do, I was given a recipe that was for blueberry muffins, and it was actually a youth entry in the fair, and they got grand champion. And so I wanted to try that same recipe. I followed it exactly. I entered it in open class, but didn't enter it in 4-star because I wanted to see how it would do, because I was using somebody else's recipe and I didn't get any ribbon at all. So you just can't, I just felt that I had to choose my items and go with it and see how I did. So after 8 years, I got it. So, and I'm been available to help anybody that has questions, or, I'm just there, our names are in the book under the 4-star section with our phone numbers. And so if anybody needs encouragement or advice or anything, they can feel free to call. Thank you.
My name's Connie Greeley, and my story goes way back when. My husband and I will have been married 50 years next year, and our first date was at the Crawford County Fair. So me being a sewer since I was probably 8 years old, starting out with doll clothes and gathered skirts for myself to wear to school, things like that. I was always interested in looking at the fancy work and so forth. And finally, this one year, I started seeing this special little area where all these things were displayed, and they're Star Homemaker, and I didn't really know what that was all about, but every year I kept seeing it and seeing it. I'm like, I can do that stuff. Well, what is all this? You know, it's in a special area. I thought, I would like to do that, but I'm kind of shy and I didn't really know what it was about, and I didn't want to ask anybody. And then one year, I'm like, I've got to do this. So there was a little mailbox near that area that had instructions on just what you needed to do. So I grabbed myself one of those papers and I asked one of the ladies about it, and she said, well, you know, you have to be able to do canning. I'm like, well, I can do that. So I took my paper home and I looked it over, and I don't think I did anything the first year. Went back to the fair again the next year, and here's all this stuff, and I'm like, I can do this. So I did. I entered and I made all this stuff and did everything I needed to do, and it was a bit frustrating. It's time consuming, and you're working full time and taking care of family, but you want to do it, you know. So I did, and I didn't win, but I think I came rather close. So I'm like, all right, I've got to try it again next year. So I started all over next year, and my second year I tied for third place, and then with the tiebreaker I ended up being fourth. So I'm like, oh, that's not bad. Let's do it again. So it kind of gets in your blood, and you just got to keep going until you keep on with the race, you know. So then the third year, praise the Lord, I did win, and it's just quite an honor. It was really overwhelming, just the gifts and the congratulations and so forth that you get, and just this feeling of satisfaction that you get yourself, you know, in doing that. And I started working with my grandchildren. They've entered stuff in the fair. They've all done very well, won first prizes and grand prizes and all sorts of things like that. And so it's just something that you really want to try to do. And like Mrs. Schreffler said, if you have any questions, just ask someone. We're glad to help you. Don't be stupid like me and shy, and just pick up the phone or see one of us at the fair and ask, and we're more than willing to help if we can. Okay.
I'm Corey Southwick. I won the title away from Beth for the youngest person to win 4-star. I was 30, she was 31. So just by the skin of my teeth did I take that little thing from her. But the way that I learned about 4-star, well, let's back up. So I've been sewing since I was little enough to cut my socks and make Barbie clothes. My mom and my Aunt Carol and my Grandma Ella all used to sew, and they made it look so easy, but when we were kids, it was more about hijacking cookies and running outside to play. We didn't really take a whole lot of time to learn from them, unless it was the winter time, and that's when I fell in love with hand stitching. So I started with hand stitching, and I could make a really neat shirt, and I wore it proudly to church one time, and I'm sure there was a lot of things wrong with it, but I was just beaming with pride. I must have been about 7 that I made this shirt, and it's still holding together. So that was fun. But when we turned about 10 and 11, we started to really want to learn how to use the sewing machines. So instead of trying to teach us rambunctious girls ourselves, they put us in 4-H for sewing. And I learned from Mrs. Mihailoff, and she was great. She was patient with us. And I learned the basics there, and then through my teen years I was sewing and doing different things. But my husband and I got married when I was 17 and he was 18. And so fresh out of high school we got married, and I remember we had company come over, and they kind of looked at our furniture like, oh, it's all hand-me-downs. Mind you, they were all teenagers, so they didn't actually technically have anything of their own. But I wanted my house to be presentable and nice looking, and that was the first time I did any upholstery work. Was my husband took me to the store and I picked out all of this fabric. And by that time, the fabric lady at Walmart had known us and known the kids by name, and they were just like, kind of like fabric grandmas is what my kids called them. So sewing has always been a part of the texture of our lives, I guess. I started with the 4-star fair stuff in, I think, 2012. It was the first time I entered. I had made a camouflage wedding dress for someone who ended up running away with somebody else, so I was stuck with a dress. And my friend saw it on Facebook, and she's like, there's this thing called 4-star, and you would be great at it. And I'm like, well, what do you got to do? And as I was going through the list, I'm like, this is all the stuff that I love. This is really neat. So I got really excited about it, and I did just kind of throw it all together the first year, which is probably why I didn't do very well. I did get ribbons, so that was enough to kind of give me the bug, and I had to try again next year. So the next year I gave it more of an attempt, and just everybody that was involved is so nice. And when you turn things in, you get to see people that you haven't seen in a while, and you know, they're interested in what you're doing, and you're interested in what they're making, and I really feel like the fair is just all about fellowship of the community, and that's just something that really energizes me when I'm getting ready to take things into the fair. Is, oh, I can't wait to see so and see what they've done and show them this, and it's the community aspect of it that I really enjoy. So the year that I won, I'm kind of bummed. I didn't have any competition. I was the only one that entered. And I almost didn't enter at all. So the first year was kind of a throw it together. The second year I really tried. The third year that I actually won, my grandfather had passed away in the springtime, and we were all kind of finding a new level of normal. So I just thought, well, I've done the 4-star the last 2 summers in a row. I want to do it again, because I feel like that would be one of the first things that we could get back to normal after dealing with cancer and Grandpa passing so quickly. So everything I made had a yellow theme. I made a dress for my daughter and a dress matching for her American Girl doll, which I thought looked really neat in the stands, because that counted as 2 items, because it wasn't together. It was 2 separate things in 2 separate categories, and that really worked for me. I think I made lemon bars and some other stuff. I should have written down what it was. I recovered a chair. I ripped apart an old lawn chair, and I used bed sheets and woven together a new seat for it, and that had aspects of yellow to it. So everything was yellow themed. And then when I saw that I was the only one, I went home really, really discouraged. And I honestly thought about calling in and just telling Cheryl Wiederspan, you know what, just pull my name out of there. I don't want to win if I only get 1 white ribbon in each of those categories. Like, that would just, I want to like conquer. I want to like win. So I almost pulled my name out, but I didn't, because she said when the points were all tallied up that it was a good showing of points, and that was encouraging. But I'm probably the only one that would really, really like to change that rule that you can only enter once, because I really want to enter again. So that's probably pretty much all I've got to say, but I just really love 4-star.
Now, the reason I wanted to show you this, I entered this when I won the 4-star. However, I did not win any ribbons on this at all. Now, it wasn't because I didn't do a good job. It was mostly because it was entered in a category that didn't really match the item. Sometimes it is difficult to figure out what category you need to enter something. And that's why it is important, if you're not sure, to ask someone who may know, and even then sometimes it is difficult to figure out what category you need to enter something in. Okay, that's all.
I'm Beth Bustamante. I was the 2008 4-Star Homemaker Award winner. As Corey had mentioned before, at that time I was the youngest one that had won. It's not typically something that a younger person does, because, you know, we have a busy life. You know, I'm a mom of 4 children, between sports and activities and just being a mom, and just everything. A little bit of background in my life. I've probably sewn for a long time. I started off with one of those little plastic machines that you get, and it's a little kit. I was probably 5 or 6. And then from then on, my mom had a 4-H group, and I went through that for many years, did Roundup, which is a big competition at the end where you model the clothing piece that you have made. For whatever year that was, it determined the type of textile you used for your clothing. So I've always enjoyed cooking, baking, canning, sewing, all of that, all the aspects of homemaking. So I never really, I don't even know what prompted me to want to do it, except for the fact that I've been born and raised going to the fair. My dad has been a big part of it. It's practically in our backyard. There's a lot of history there. My dad has built a miniature rendition of the fair, and it's been on display at the oncology unit up at Yolanda Barcos in the past. It's amazing. It's always got me very excited about the fair. Whenever it comes, it's just something that we look forward to. So from that aspect, I think, and going through the home show buildings, and I've entered in 4-H, I think that was one of the things that I have a very competitive side to me. So that was one of the things I was like, I'm going to try this. It took me 3 years. My first year I got 3rd place. My second year I was runner-up, and then my 3rd year I won the 4-star. I guess it's one of those things where it's a relief, but at the same time, there really is no other big award to that extent. It is something that I love to see other people do. It's one of those things where there's still involvement in my era of my age group, but there are younger people that don't even know how to thread a needle. There's a millennial group there that this is becoming a dying art. So I like to educate people on how to do that. I'm a homeschooling mother. That is one of the things that I teach, as far as learning home skills, learning how to cake, learning how, to cook, to bake cakes or whatever, learning how to sew. It's something that needs to be carried on. It's one of those trades that you'll always need. You'll always need to know how to do it. I guess one of my favorite things to do, and it is cook. I love the challenge of making something new and having people over to try it. That makes some people nervous to take something new. Like tonight I brought this chocolate chip banana bread. I've never made it ever, so it's one of those things that I used to do for the fair too. I've never made it, and I enter it. One of the funny things that I can remember when I was trying to make my things for the 4-star, baking is one of those things you have to do either the day of, preferably, or the night before, depending on what it is, because you want it in its freshest state. We kind of live on a side road, and we had a drunk driver run into a utility pole, and the transformer went out. Therefore, our electricity went out. And I was sweating because I needed to bake bread, and it takes a long time, It's like it was in a bread machine, and it takes 3 or 4 hours, and I'm up at the wee hours, and this happens. I'm like, what am I gonna do? So I call my mom, and I'm like, I have to bring everything to your house, and I have to make it like now, or I'm not going to meet the deadline. So I think we all, as Star Homemakers, have had like tight moments like that, and that's okay. But that just is what keeps you going and driving you into doing that. And I just want to encourage anybody who wants to do it. just go for it, and it doesn't hurt anything.
These were both in my 4-star presentation, both were written. And then this is a foundation to the one.
This apron was in the 4-star category. And then my step stool or tuffet made out of recycled pies, that was part of the 4-star too, that I had. And the rest of the things I bought are just items I've made. This was actually in the fair that year, but it was not entered in the 4-star. So that's one thing that people can do when they do the 4-star is enter as many items as they have in any category they can fill.
This is one that was in a trial 4-star category. Didn't make it. This was my 4-star dress for my granddaughter. She wore in a wedding. And this was a vest that I won in 4-star.
This is something I made for my daughter Brooklyn. Kids are the most difficult people to care for. Most of this is like add-ons that after the fact the day is really done. But we wore it to school dance and everyone seemed to like it. I think so.